Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can find the show online at buildingthefutureshow.com or follow me on Twitter at BuildingShow. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. I'm excited to announce that I am now a brand ambassador for the Business Rock Summit in Manchester, England, April 21st and 22nd, where Steve Wozniak is headlining. More details at business-rocks.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Nicole Bray, founder of Authentic Influence. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I know when we originally talked, it was a while ago, and it took a while just for us to coordinate. But I'm excited to have you on the show, and we're actually recording. And you've kind of moved to America from Canada. So maybe kind of before we get into kind of what you're doing, maybe let's kind of cover your background little bit and cover where you grew up.
Sure. Basically, I was going to go way back. I was born in Calgary. But I moved to Edmonton in second grade and basically had the Edmontonian blood transfusion. I always kind of laugh about that because I never really tell anybody I'm from Calgary.
That's funny.
It's just a fact. Edmonton is far more my town. I did move back to Calgary to go to multimedia college right after high school, though. So I did try the city on again after graduation, but Edmonton just really was. It just felt more like home to me. So I ended up back there not long after graduating from college.
Sure.
But I'm a prairie girl through and through. I lived in Red Deer for a while and I went to film school as well. So I'm a prairie girl. I've been all across the prairies.
Nice. So did you go to SAIT then in Calgary?
No, actually, I graduated. I was the first graduating class out of the Applied Multimedia Training Center group. It's a college that actually started on the East Coast, I think in the Toronto, Ontario area.
Right.
And they had just started a satellite school in Calgary on the Cloud Trail Century. I can't remember what it's called. But I was the first graduating class out of there in, I think it was 1996 or 97. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So
way back then when you would use those machines and it took 6 hours to render 30 minutes of 3D animation.
Yes, I remember those days very, very well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what did you do after post-secondary?
Well, I went to post-secondary 3 times. So
Okay.
I did Multimedia Design and Communications College.
Okay.
And then I did a few years at the University of Alberta with a major in design and a minor in marketing. But once I finished all the fun courses at the U of A, I didn't want to do any of the hard courses like economics and statistics. So I dropped out of university. And I followed a different passion, and I went to film, and I went to film school in Red Deer. So kind of after that, I moved back up to Edmonton and sort of got a job right away, actually. Actually, I got a job right away in Red Deer at the RDTV. It used to be RDTV there, and then it became global for a little while. And yeah, so 2 weeks after graduation from film school, I had a gig.
That's awesome.
And I was working. Yeah, I was the art director for RDTV and got to rebrand them. And I did all of their on-air graphics and Chiron and all that kind of stuff, which was super, super cool.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So I'm curious then, how long did you kind of do TV for?
First stint in TV in Red Deer was, I think, 3 years.
Okay.
But then I got homesick for Edmonton. So I went on a 5-week trip to Thailand and explored, got my travel bug when I was 25. That was the first airplane I ever took.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, we decided to move back to Edmonton. So we did our traveling and then moved back to Edmonton. And all the time during that time, I was still working as a web designer for my own business.
Okay.
On the side. So I just kind of kept doing that when we moved up to Edmonton for a little while.
Okay. So then how did you kind of get into doing social media?
Well, throughout, bouncing back and forth in cities and after college and after university and everything, I was always the graphic designer, and the graphic designer always ends up in the marketing department.
Of course, yeah.
So they end up often, back in those days, you're the only one who knows how to use like, page editing software and things like that. So you start learning how to do marketing things like e-newsletters and brochures and things like that. So because I had the graphic design as well as the marketing piece, that was always where my career led me. And then in 2009, I was working for a law firm, and they were really starting to harness social media, and it was starting to pop up, right? Like Facebook started in 2007, and so they were the first company that I worked for that was actually they were second, really harnessing social media and using it as a channel for their marketing. And I just saw like a light bulb go off, and I was like, this is the next thing that's really going to be happening. Just like when I graduated high school, I was like, you know what? The movie Toy Story was out then, and I was like, that is the newest, coolest thing. I want to do it.
That's
so
awesome.
That's why I went to that school. And then when I heard about social media, I'm like, that is the next newest, coolest thing. I want to learn it. So I just dove in, and I taught myself as much as I could. And thankfully, the company that I was working for was utilizing it. And so I learned a lot about that. But ultimately, I have to say one of the biggest teachers for social media for me is a group that I later was volunteering with Social Media Breakfast Edmonton.
Oh, yes, I've been to that a few times. It's actually really good.
Yeah, so I went to, I think they were only in their fourth session when I went to my first one, and I just saw, how people were using social media. I think it was the Edmonton Police Service that were using it at the time, and I just sort of engulfed myself in volunteering with them and seeing the different applications and different ways to build community along with marketing a business. So I owe a lot of the learning, real life learning, to Social Media Breakfast, and just how broad it can be, and all the people that I met through there that were doing it, and learning from them and what they were doing and being inspired by them. So
sure, no,
it's huge.
I think that's really good advice. I guess maybe do you want to just mention kind of what the Social Media Breakfast is and kind of does, just for the listeners that, if they don't have one in their city, that maybe they can think about starting one?
Sure. Social Media Breakfast, it started in Boston. It's been around for almost 10 years, I think. But basically, it's sort of an arm of the bigger kind of picture, and it's a breakfast meeting. It's free. For most of them are free because the food and beverage and stuff is paid for by a sponsor. But it's a breakfast early morning where you go to a meeting place, and they introduce you to speakers who are utilizing social media to build community or in their business. They've done everything from sharing to people how people have done GoFundMe campaigns and things of that nature, to little niche pieces like Comic-Con and people writing their own comics on things like Tumblr and stuff like that. So it's just a really cool way to learn a lot of different aspects of social media and how people are using them. And they try to not be repetitive. They try to teach something new every time. It's less and less about the ins and outs of the application, like how to use Twitter or how to use Facebook or Snapchat. It's more about how people are building communities using several different tools, and it's more about the ongoing strategy about that versus this is how you use this tool. And they have them sometimes some cities have them at lunch hours, but they're really taking off. I know that in Alberta, they're in Calgary, they're in Red Deer. I think Grand Prairie just started one up. So there is a basis, if somebody wanted to start one, if they didn't have one in their sort of area. There is kind of a guideline, because there are so many different pockets of them in big cities, that you get a lot of support and sort of branding and sort of the layout of how to run it and things like that as well. So it's a pretty well developed, I don't even know if you want to call it a franchise. It's a community franchise, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I'm curious because you recently moved from Canada down to Houston. Is there one in Houston? Do you know?
There absolutely is. That was one of the first things that I looked up.
Really? That's awesome.
I haven't made it yet because it's in the downtown core, and to get into the downtown core for breakfast is not a good time with the traffic.
I can imagine.
But haven't mastered the crazy free ways here yet, so I haven't been there yet. But I have connected with the host on social media through Twitter. So she knows I'm here, and she knows my involvement with Social Media Breakfast Edmonton.
Sure.
I just haven't made it there yet. Yeah.
See, but I think that's really cool because, obviously I'm assuming that you didn't know tons of people, if any, really in Houston when you moved recently. So I think just having a community of people, of like-minded individuals, that you can automatically start reaching out to when you move, I think is super powerful.
Absolutely, and the way that happened is through Twitter, right? Like I went to the Social Media Breakfast Houston, and I made a list of people on there on my Twitter list, and now I go and I check my Twitter list and see what they're talking about and where they're going to be and what they're doing, and it's a phenomenal tool. And yeah, it was very easy to think of, okay, well, making a community or joining like-minded, passionate people would be very simple. So I kind of put the groundwork out there before I even left Canada. Sure.
No, I think that's super important because I kind of get asked all the time about how to go about kind of networking, especially in a town or city that you just moved to. And I think, I found Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn kind of super useful for that. And I think it's just all about figuring out who you want to target in that city and kind of going after it, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think there also needs something to be said of, the technology. Like, back, even 10 years ago, people were on, little back-end forums that didn't have the platforms. But now we have these tools that can make that joining of that community so easy and so, kind of applicable to wherever you are. So hands up to the tools that are out there now to make that process seem so less foreboding.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So I'm kind of curious, maybe let's talk about your company, Authentic Influence, and kind of why did you start the company?
Well, I started the company only because I had to have a company name for tax purposes. I only ever wanted to be a consultant.
Interesting.
So I only ever wanted to be a consultant. I had a graphic design business previously, and so I kind of knew what I didn't want to do by learning the ropes in my graphic design business. So I didn't want to have this huge breadth of client base per se and have a whole bunch of freelancers and get so bogged down by the business management of things. I still wanted to be the hands-on consultant.
Right.
So I started out, basically I met my first client at a networking event.
Okay.
And told her, you know what, this is what I'm branching out into. I was still employed at that point. I said, but this is really where I'm focusing and what my niches are going to be. And she said, we need somebody like you. And so I sent her a proposal, and within 3 months, she was my first client.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I think that's super important, like about kind of getting back to networking and, you just kind of run into somebody and automatically you kind of start your consultancy.
Yep, absolutely. And I think timing was big too. If someone's feeling that they're on the precipice of something and they have that sort of flutter in their heart and they just can't wait to dive in, that means that now is the time. If I would have waited and sort of dragged my feet and, I had no idea what the proposal was going to say. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I just went ahead and wrote, the duties that I would perform for this company and what my rate was. I did my research on rates and things. And I just put it out there and I just let it go to the universe and said, you know what, if this is meant to be, then that's how it's going to be. And, it just sort of luckily kind of all came together in this beautiful sort of type of business, I guess. But what I did know from my previous business was, sort of to keep that proposal brief and really offer service and make it about the customer versus about me, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really good advice. And I love the idea that you didn't really have kind of a proposal. You just kind of was like, well, this is my first one. Let's go for it, right? I love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you're given an opportunity like that, you got to swing for you got to go for it.
Well, sure. And I think part of it too. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I just remember that feeling of being so excited to write that proposal and to focus on this next part of marketing. and how I was so eager to learn, and it was a phenomenal client that I got to work with. I had an amazing brand established already, so that excitement really helped me sort of just go for it.
Sure. So you don't have to mention any client names, but kind of what types of clients do you like to work with, or who do you work with?
I've worked with everything from smaller malls to real estate agents to not-for-profits to hotels and to a TV station. So I'm kind of all over the place.
That's good. It keeps it interesting.
The kinds that I've really been drawn to are the clients that would tell the Edmonton story in a way. So hotels, obviously, they talk about tourism and they talk about the city, and I'm such a huge fan of Edmonton, even though I'm not there anymore. But it's easy to talk about a concept versus selling. So I guess the clients I like to work for or with are ones that aren't necessarily trying to market or sell a product, but more so sell an experience. Like a realtor is selling the experience of moving your life into your home that's going to be filled with memories.
Right.
That's the story that I want to tell. I don't want to tell, come and buy my $69 whatever product it is. I don't want to tell those stories, and social media isn't the place to do that anyway. So knowing that right off the bat is sort of helped me to know, granted, the mall that I was working with, it was a very tough to not sell, right? You're trying to get people to the mall to buy things and be in the stores and things of that nature. So we would do contesting and things like that would draw people in and have them sort of experience the mall by doing scavenger hunts or photos with Santa or things like that. Something that would bring something to their life versus a product that they were just going to take home and that type of thing. So those are the kinds of clients I do like to work with, the ones that have a good story to tell.
Sure. No, that's awesome. And kind of looking at your profile online, you kind of mentioned that you're a brand ambassador for a lot of these companies. Do you want to maybe cover kind of before you talk about what a brand ambassador is or kind of does for a company?
Sure. So being a brand ambassador means a lot of companies don't like to talk about themselves. They're very humble. They kind of maybe don't know a whole lot of marketing. So having a brand ambassador is a person that can't wait to shout from the rooftops all of the awesome qualities of that business and why they can make a difference in a person's life. So I love being the brand ambassador for Edmonton, talking about all the great things about Edmonton, the winter city, and things like that. So having somebody else be the champion takes that sort of threat away from somebody thinking that they're bragging about themselves.
Right.
So it's so easy to hit up your buddy and say, hey, you did awesome at this, 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 and that. Or I love it when you go to this, 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 and that. It's so easy to talk about somebody else than to talk about yourself. So it's great to have a person who has the mindset where, A, they buy into the company 110%. That's obviously first and foremost. You have to buy into their marketing, their mission statements, all that kind of stuff. So you have to honestly feel like this is a good company and they are providing value to people to be a brand ambassador. And then it's also about being a storyteller. So to be a good brand ambassador, you have to sort of open people's eyes and say, that would be a great story. We need to tell the public about that. And because sometimes people are so in their business, they have their blinders on. It's all about profits and margins and meetings and budgets. And, they don't kind of have that sort of look at things. So it's your job as a brand ambassador to pull out those nuggets of stories. A lot of people don't talk a lot about what they're doing in the community, like how they're giving back. So, again, that's another piece that people are very humble about. They don't want to be bragging that they're giving $50,000 to the food bank this year, but they should be, right? So you, as a brand ambassador, have to say, look at how you're contributing to the community that your business is in. You're doing a great job. Let's tell people about it. So that's really, in my mind, the brand ambassador's job is to just be the champion because someone else is too humble to do it themselves.
Sure. No, I think that's awesome. And it's super important. And I think also being kind of a brand ambassador lets you kind of meet and interact with people that almost you wouldn't get to necessarily interact with just if it was you personally. At least in my experience, when I've done it, it's kind of opened a bunch of doors that I didn't really see possible until I started kind of doing it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. When you're not talking about yourself, but you're talking about somebody else, I mean, that whole issue is not there anymore. So it's very easy to go into a group and meet people and just be yourself and kind of hang out and meet new people, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So maybe let's kind of talk about if I'm a business or even personally, and I kind of want to get started with social media, how should I get started with social media?
Well, if you're a business and you want to get started on social media, obviously the very first thing you have to have is a marketing plan and a marketing budget.
Okay.
So have a marketing plan, know your mission statement, know your key values, and figure out what stories you can tell that are about your business and your contribution to the community versus trying to sell them a product. Because social media isn't about selling, it's about building community so that community will then buy from you. So you've got to lay the groundwork of building the community and building an authentic community. So figure out from your, profile your customers. What I often do with my new clients is we profile like 3 to 5 customers. We say, this is Susie travel girl, or this is Brad, the lawyer guy, or this is, and we profile these customers so that we know when we're trying to market to them what we should be saying and what we should be speaking to. So kind of so that when you're writing your Facebook post, you're thinking, maybe you're Cabela's and Hunter Harry is going to want to read about this, but that was just posted in this other magazine, kind of so you can put that hat on of your customer. And so you're using the language that they're going to be intrigued by. So
right.
That's another thing to do. And then just figure out the stories that you can tell and everything you do online is going to tell a story to those 5 potential customers.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. Is there or do you have any advice on kind of what networks to start with? Because there's so many nowadays.
Yes. It depends on some of it depends on your budget, but again, it depends on your customer. So where are your customers? If your customer is an 18-year-old or an 18 to 25-year-old, they are not on Facebook. They're on Snapchat and they're on Instagram. If you're targeting, the people who are lawyers or a little bit more intellect or like to read reviews of services and products, then you're likely going to want to be on Twitter because people are looking for that referral, that shout out from somebody recommending something. And that's really kind of what Twitter, a personality who uses Twitter is more like. I always say that Twitter is like the CNN news feed of any city. So it's more of a news gathering and information gathering resource versus Facebook, which is, kind of your backyard barbecue, generally 6 degrees of separation from your neighbor or your high school buddy or So really know where, pick the network where your ideal client is going to be. Now, the other aspect that comes into the picking of the social media channel is what's your budget and how much analytics do you need to back up the spending of your budget. Sure. Facebook's advertising is incredible. Their analytics are awesome. Their interest lists, you can use pixels that when people click on your website, it's trackable to their IP address and you can create a list out of that. Like its back end for its advertising has phenomenal analytics. It's really good and it can be extremely affordable. Sure. Whereas Twitter's analytics are not nearly as strong and it's pricier, but their reach is a little bit bigger. Because they don't have the algorithms that Facebook has that keeps things out of people's news feeds, right?
Right.
So if you've got 100 people on your Facebook page only 3% of them are seeing your content unless it's paid for. And even if it's paid for, you might be able to bump that up to about maybe 42%.
Right.
So,
I got you. Interesting. So would you say what would you recommend? Like, is there a minimum that people should kind of put aside for a budget? Like, is it a couple thousand? Is it 10,000? Or does it really depend on kind of the client?
The budget to start out doesn't need to be that big. The budget to start out is actually your time, the cost of your time. Okay. So when you're first starting out, you need to be able to pretty much feel like you're working for free
Sure.
because you're going to be spending a lot of time building community. And that's the first step. Once you've got a little bit of a base, and you can start advertising, because you can't even, if we're talking Facebook, you can't even advertise unless you have 100 likes on your page to start with.
Okay.
You have to have 100 first before it'll even give you the option to advertise. Whereas Twitter, people are going to click on your link or click on your profile, and if you haven't established a little bit of a following and they see a little bit of a record and some history of your conversations, then you're losing out. So it's all about laying that groundwork and building the community initially before you start spending.
Okay, so it could take months,
Once you
really.
Yes, absolutely. It could take months.
Okay.
But do it thoughtfully, right? Social media isn't something you're going to jump in and within 3 weeks you're going to have $100,000 in sales. It's just not going to happen.
Sure. I guess unless you're like a huge brand or something, right? Like it's unheard of.
Yeah, if you're a huge brand, then you've been doing social media for a long time already, and this is not new.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? So I'm curious then, would you recommend kind of sharing different content on different networks, or just share everything across everything?
That's tough. Because I think that your audience is a little bit different on each channel. So you can sometimes get away with sharing the same content on multiple channels. But make sure that each channel has a little bit something different. Definitely don't auto-post. Don't auto-post anything. Don't link your Twitter to your Facebook, to your Instagram. Just don't do it. It's lazy marketing.
Sure. And
people are going to notice it and discredit you because it's like you're not really committing to the community. You're looking for an easy fix, and people notice that and they'll know right away. So spend the time cultivating the network, and I think I forgot the question.
No, I just kind of like share different content on different networks. Yes, good or bad, I guess.
Okay, so sharing, right. So keep each network organic to itself in how that network is supposed to function, and then you can kind of keep different pieces of content. Like a longer story on Facebook, obviously, is not going to work on Twitter.
Sure.
And you probably don't want to write this big long story on Facebook and then write a tweet about it and send somebody back to Facebook. You can, but would that then be better as a blog post? So I say, keep it, I don't know, like every fifth post on all channels, maybe. Sort of kind of that type of way to go about things. Again, you have to think, are you on all channels with the same customer? Probably not.
Right.
Right. So think about how that channel works into your customer profile and if it should be on all of them. If that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting because even just like me doing the social media stuff for this show, it's weird how like certain content works really well on certain networks, and there's even certain networks that I post content and I've tried kind of like promoting it a little bit, and some networks it does really, really well, and others I get like no traction whatsoever. So I've kind of stopped, posting stuff to certain networks and whatnot, and I might try to revisit it in the past, but I think you kind of almost need to try different things on different networks and then kind of weed out the networks that aren't really working for you. Or do you disagree with that statement?
No, I think that's absolutely right. You do have to try things on and see what's working and what doesn't. That's why social media marketing is so interesting and why it's around still, is because things are always changing and you have to sort of go with the flow and try things on, and that's why analytics are so key, right? you've got to look at your analytics and say, okay, did that work? And if it didn't, then stop doing it and try something else. You have to be a bit of a risk taker and have to be willing to try things and willing to bang your head against the wall sometimes too.
No, I 100% agree, because like the show does really well. For example, like I keep using myself just because I know it the most, I suppose, but it's like the show does really well as like on FM as a podcast, but on YouTube, I can't break YouTube. You know, like it's just one of those things that I still post content to, but I don't promote it at all anymore, just because it's just not worth my time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe one
So
day I'll go back to it.
Just more on YouTube a little bit for a little while, and and then get over it.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Have a little funeral and.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, how often would you recommend people be posting on social media?
I've honestly found the best formula for the majority of my clients is once per day on Facebook.
Okay.
And don't forget about the weekends, because the weekends are still important. Use your analytics on Facebook to know what time your community is online. So go into the insights and find out, okay, well, do I bother posting at 9 a.m.? No, because everybody's on at 9 p.m.
Right.
Look at that curve in the analytics dashboard on Facebook and really study it so that you know. Twitter is more like that CNN newsfeed. So you can post a tweet an hour if you have that much valuable content. People scroll down Twitter, and within, they can only get past an hour before it's been 15 minutes and they need to go on and move on to their life,
Sure.
So once an hour does work. My formula that I like to not be too noisy and that I have good quality content for is about twice per day on Twitter, to be honest.
No, that makes sense.
Then it's not always about talking about yourself, though. Time should still be spent on both of those networks, talking to your community, looking at hashtags, getting in on conversations that have absolutely nothing to do with your business. There has to be at least 30 minutes a day per network that you're spending just building community and not talking about yourself at all.
Oh, that's it. That's interesting.
Yeah. You can go on Twitter and just be a talking head.
Sure.
But depending on who you are, like, you're going to get so much further of being a talking head if you actually engage with people and find out who your influencers are. Influencers on Twitter are huge.
Sure.
So if you can find out who those influencers are and connect with them in a genuine way on a weekly or even a monthly basis, you will get far more traction with the content that you're putting out there.
So how would you kind of go about connecting with these people? Do you just reply at them, or is there kind of another tactic?
Even something simple as retweeting their content. Give them a hey buddy, I'm listening to you.
Okay.
I like what you're putting out there, and I'm gonna endorse what you're talking about. For example, a favorite works that way as well. I live and breathe in my Hootsuite dashboard. I have keyword searches. I have hashtag searches. For one of my clients, just one hashtag search helps me get into conversations. They live in a smaller community. They're in Sherwood Park. So I tune into the Sherwood Park hashtag on a daily basis, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, and I retweet content that's community-minded. I like and favorite, or I reply back to something that I think is cool or anything like that. So you can really quiet the noise that is Twitter by using the Hootsuite dashboard. I am a huge proponent of Hootsuite. I took their Hootsuite University course about 4 years ago, and it was awesome, and it's free, and it walks you through really in depth of how to use the tool. So using that tool really helps me authentically engage with the people that I am connecting with. And Twitter lists are huge. Again, you're taking your following of over 8,000 people per chance, and you're narrowing it down to, let's say, foodies, right? Maybe you're a restaurant and you want to narrow it down, and you make a list of all the food bloggers, and then you have your list in your dashboard, and then those food bloggers are all chatting up whatever they're chatting up through the day, and you can chime in on that conversation. oftentimes somebody will say, any recommendations for whatever in the thing, and we'll be able to say, hey, we have this special hot chocolate happening on the patio right now. And it's a very authentic sell, but essentially that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, no, totally. This is really good advice because like I know lots of people struggle with this and don't really understand it. And I think just knowing some tools and kind of free courses and kind of what to promote on which networks, I think makes a lot of sense. And I'm kind of curious, have you tried anything with like Blab or Periscope or kind of any of those like other streaming video services?
I have. I really like Periscope.
Okay.
I think it's new and really cool. And I think that Periscope has a valid space in the social media space. It is for real-time stuff. Like, let's say, again, you're a restaurant, and your chef is cooking, let's say, a Christmas turkey. And you decide, you know what, I'm going to do a Periscope. I'm essentially going to do a mini cooking course on how to properly baste this turkey or stuff it or something, real-time, so that people are tuning in right now in the moment. They're in the kitchen. They're, and especially if you build a following around the chef or around a restaurant, people are going to tune into that. Like, that's like basically watching TV that was made for you in your house, and it's on your phone while you're on the bus or, whatever.
Sure.
So I think it's a really exciting platform. But I think the challenge with Periscope, and scopers are starting to learn kind of how to do this, is a lot of scopers spend so much time, thanking people for hearting them and saying hello to all the people as they're coming onto the network. And I think that loses people. I think that if you spend the first 5 minutes saying, hi, so-and-so from Syracuse, hi, so-and-so from Alabama, hi, so-and-so, then you're not giving the value that people have tuned in for. So I think that that's the one sort of thing that Periscopers haven't really sort of figured out yet, is to how to have that engagement and getting, that heart or talking to the people who are tuning in, as well as providing the value of the video content that you're giving to them. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of kind of rolls out, and if they make any changes to the network or anything like that. And the other thing that's cool with Periscope is, those things only last 24 hours. So the sense of urgency to watch now is definitely there. So if you can use Twitter to say, hey, I'm scoping about this at 3 p.m. on Friday, and, send that tweet out a couple of times throughout the week to tell your community to tune in on this new network and when, then they're going to come over and they're going to get that valued piece of real-time content. And then, they have the opportunity to share it in the moment, or, it lasts for 24 hours, and they might say, hey, I watched this super cool scope, and then send it out to the world knowing that it's got a timestamp.
Yeah, no.
So that's a really cool new network. If you can find your niche and create value in real time of what that video is going to be all about.
Sure. No, that's interesting to me. I'm kind of curious about a couple other networks. Like, do you do anything on Snapchat? I've heard mixed kind of reviews about it, and I'm kind of curious to know if you've had any kind of success or with Snapchat.
I'm not on Snapchat myself because my clients don't have a youthful community.
Okay,
so
fair.
Snapchat, for my understanding, is a very youthful demographic. Anywhere from 12-year-olds to maybe like 20, 22, and
Sure.
and a little bit of the older demographic. The brands that I choose to work with are very elegant and sophisticated, and I find that the emoticons and, sort of some of the things on Snapchat are just not applicable to my clients. So I don't use that network. I think it would be really cool to have a client where that niche demographic is totally, there, and to dive into that. But as of yet, I haven't had a client that uses it, and I don't want to spread myself too thin.
Sure.
That's just something else for businesses, right? You cannot be successful being everywhere.
Sure.
So, if you aren't posting something on Snapchat like once a day or even 3 times a week, then, what are you doing there?
No, I think that's really good advice. And I think just the fact that you kind of have a target client and you just don't use certain networks because they're not your client's target audience. I think that's just as useful as saying you should post here, right? It's also saying like you shouldn't post here because of the demographic or the type of content. Because you're right, emoticons don't really kind of show off the luxury hotel market, you know?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's really good advice.
Yeah. If your branding works in the Snapchat, I guess that's another thing too. If your branding works in the Snapchat realm, then go for it. Like if you don't have to worry about font choice and photography, style and lighting and all of that, then for sure, give it a shot. So apply that, if your brand works in a Snapchat, snapshot, then go for it. So, yeah.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. But Nicole, we're out of time. So maybe let's close the show with kind of promoting yourself online and where people can kind of find you online.
Again, I'm just a consultant. I do have 2 freelancers, but primarily I'm a one pony show.
Sure.
So they can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me.
Okay. I'll post that in the show
Nicole
notes.
Bray on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then my website address, I just have an About Me page, which is on my LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
I guess the reason why I don't have a huge social media presence for my business is because then I'm taking my focus away from being the brand ambassador for my clients and having to be the brand ambassador for my business. So that's why I've chosen to not really establish a strong social media presence for my business, because I want to be able to walk into my clients' businesses and be their brand champion and not have to worry about, this will be a great story for my business. And then, kind of do that self-promotion thing. Again, I'm humble. I don't really want to talk about myself. I want to talk about other people. So that's what.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because you're right. You can suck so much time into promoting yourself, like just with social media and other channels and whatnot. And you're right. It just definitely takes away from your client time. And especially like if you're just a consultant, you don't really want to, you're not saying like, oh, we're trying to get like 100 employees. It's just like, you just want to take enough client work just to handle yourself and maybe farm out a little bit to some other people. But it makes sense as like what you're trying to do as a consultant. And I think that's really good advice for people out there.
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to start out, then be a consultant, be a freelancer. Start out that way and get a good client base that you can handle individually without burning out, because you got to worry about social media burnout too, and that's a good way to start. So.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Well, Nicole, this has been awesome. Thanks again for doing the show, and we'll be in touch soon.